I think a lot of the benefits for students who are participating in an international learning opportunity within their degree programs include not just personal growth but also academic growth. If they're going on an exchange program, they're learning actually as a student in a different educational context. So they're learning about education and how it's done and how it's taught and how marking and grading systems are taking place. So for Faculty of Education students, this is particularly good because they're learning that there's more than one way of doing these things, that the way that we do in Ontario, Canada is not the only way to deliver education and to deliver successful education. So that in itself is a great learning opportunity. From a personal perspective as well, they're able to make new friends, personal and professional connections. They're able to be able to throw themselves into a completely different context and figure out how things work in a society where they may not even speak the language. So all of those are beneficial learning opportunities and opportunities for personal growth. The students are also able then to hopefully pick up a language, and maybe not fully during the time that they're there, but they're able to pick up at least a section of the language. A number of our students, when they've come home from learning opportunities such as in Germany, have continued to continue learning the language so that they eventually do become fluent, and eventually that may take them in a new career path that they've never anticipated before. It's also a way for students to learn more about their own professional interests. I know a number of students who've gone on international learning opportunities have come back and changed their career goals. Now they've decided that they may want to go and teach somewhere else when they've never considered that before. So those are all extremely useful benefits for students as a part of their degree program. It also helps, I think, even in a local context when looking at their resumes. If there are not a lot of teaching jobs right now and certain students have gone and thrown themselves into a completely different experience, have not spoken the language and jumped into a place, this is also something that will look good on their resumes when they're looking to apply for either teaching positions or other jobs. And it is something that's going to affect their outlook on the world and their lens that they're looking through with when they're working with people, with other people in a professional situation as well. Sometimes being the other in a situation is a good way for them to know what it's like for students who've immigrated to Canada and are experiencing that same feeling of being not quite in place or completely feeling like an outsider. So it's good for all of us to have that feeling ourselves so that we can understand what other people are going through. So some of the things that may deter students from Canada in participating in an international learning opportunity somewhere else, the largest factor we know is money. And so it's financially very difficult for some students who are already on a strapped budget, perhaps paying tuition and living expenses in Toronto, to consider taking a flight and traveling to another location. So we know that money is usually the biggest factor in deterring students. The one way that we've tried to overcome that at York University, unlike a lot of other places, is to have bursaries available for students in order to help them offset the cost of this, to make it more accessible. But even then, it's still difficult for students to get their minds around the fact that, we can actually afford to do these things. Travel is often seen as something that's very expensive and that's not accessible to everybody. By the funding being in place, we hope that it's available not just to the students who are from high economic means, but to all students in the program. So that's one of our goals at York. One of the other things that probably deters students from participating is language. A number of students around the world are learning English, so it's easier for them in some cases to come here than it is for our students to go, even if they have a rudimentary understanding of language from their families. If they speak basic Hindi or basic Mandarin, it may not be enough in order to get by in a workplace or in an exchange program where they're actually submitting academic papers. So language is probably the second biggest factor for our students in thinking that it's not something that they will participate in. I think the biggest way to encourage them is just when one of their friends or a few of their friends actually participate in this sort of thing and they realize that, actually I can afford it because there are bursaries available and I don't have to necessarily speak the language fluently, or there are other options where I can get by with the language that they do have in order to make it accessible. It would be very difficult to make an international learning opportunity mandatory in a program. The main reasons being, if it's going to be mandatory in a program, we also have to make sure that it's accessible to all students. And so that would mean making a very large financial commitment to make sure that every student could afford to be able to go on an international learning opportunity. So we know that there are wonderful opportunities for students to participate in, but we'd really have to make sure that it was accessible to all students, rather than just to the elite few who have unlimited financial means in order to do that. So when we're looking at programs, that's one of the things that we really need to consider is what's accessible and what students can really realistically be able to afford to do, and be able to do en masse as opposed to just a specialized program. The other thing that we need to consider is students' readiness. We want to make sure that we're not putting them into a situation that they're not able to handle. So looking at the types of placements for each particular student would be something that we would want to do. And also making sure that we're building in enough opportunity for students to really genuinely grow and learn in a culture, not to send them as such a large group that they bring Canada with them and don't really experience the culture to the same extent. So those would all be considerations if we were planning something new in a new type of program.